Greetings. I'm Pastor Eric Smith. Grace and peace to you. This is The Message.
Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. John would have prevented him, saying, "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" But Jesus answered him, "Let it be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness." Then he consented, and when Jesus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove, and alighting on him. And in a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased."
Let the church hear.
Let the church hear what the Spirit is saying.
Thanks be to God. Will you join with me in the preparation? Come, Holy Spirit, come with the fire and burn. Come with the rain and cleanse. Come with the light and reveal. Convict us, convert us, consecrate us until we do something. Amen. Well, in the alternate reality called the liturgical calendar, we celebrate today the baptism of the Lord. In our reality, we're going to baptize May Keller. And in doing so, we will remember something essential about faith. The grace in belonging comes before belief, before effort, before understanding. Long before we chose or choose God, God gave us life. Long before we find our place, we have been held. Today's not only about water and the sacrament of the church, it's about the deep truth spoken at the beginning of every life. You belong to God. Well, we've all had experience of belonging or not belonging. I was trying to think of a couple for myself, I went back to elementary school, recess at Central School, out on the playground. We played kickball a lot, and whoever the best players were usually the captains. They'd be the two captains, and then they would pick people, and you wanted to be picked early, not late, and then there were always the possibility that you wouldn't get picked at all. Yeah, not so good. Well, then I thought about later in life. In my 50s, I was the pastor at the University United Methodist Church in Irvine, right close to the campus there. And we had a whole lot of young people, college students and young adults, as part of that congregation. Well, we had a young associate minister in the congregation, Sarah, and she was charismatic and gregarious and always was bringing, able to attract a crowd. So she came up to me one time and said, "Hey, we're going to do some music. The young folks are going to do some music over in somebody's backyard in Costa Mesa. You want to go?" "Oh, sure, I'll do that." I mean, I didn't think of myself as an old person at that point. So I went over with all these 20-somethings over there, and they're playing guitars in the backyard, so I got mine out, and I'm playing along with them. I'm really enjoying the whole thing. And after a while, this guy comes up to me, one of the guys, and he comes up and he says, "You need to stop now, because we've got some other people who are going to do something." Okay. And all of a sudden, I didn't feel young anymore. And I didn't really feel like I belonged there anymore. And you probably had experiences like that. There's one other thing that I thought of. I don't spend a lot of time on Facebook anymore because I don't think it's real healthy for us. But I do check in because keep track of a lot of people that way. And one of the things I've noticed about all the folks that I know from growing up, who live all across the world, all around the world at this point, is that when you go into the information about them on Facebook, they'll always say, "I'm from Coronado." It doesn't matter where they live or how long they lived here. They'll always say, I'm from Coronado, because there's a belonging sort of thing about being here, about being in Coronado. And so, you've experienced these things. I think you know the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Well, shift gears here. Sociologists and psychologists are tracking a demographic group. They're called the nuns, not N-U-N, it's N-O-N-E, the nuns. They're people who, when they're asked about their religious affiliation, they answer none. And it's not a belief system, it's not an organized movement, it's an absence. Many nuns have not rejected spirituality. What they have left behind is institutional religion. Some left through disagreement, some just quietly drifted away. I know when COVID stopped people from going to church, churches stopped. I mean, I thought that was a big deal. Church never stops, but church stopped. And there were some folks who just never came back again after that. There were some who talked about judgment or irrelevance or exhaustion with faith that no longer felt trustworthy or meaningful. The nuns don't feel hostility so much as distance. Many continue to care deeply about their spirituality, about justice, about compassion, and about meaning. But what they haven't found is a place where those longings are expressed in shared life that they find honest and compelling. We aspire to that. We aspire to that. Now, depressing as this all is, the experience of the nuns is not new. In the late 4th century, a young man turned away from the faith of his childhood and set out to learn from the spiritual teachers of his day. He searched seriously, giving himself fully to a system that promised insight and coherence. The system was called Manichaeism. The year was 386 AD. The young man was Augustine. He realized his commitment couldn't fulfill his desires. Then he returned to the faith his mother had taught him. Over time, he became a bishop of the church, a theologian, and one of the most influential voices in Christian history. Reflecting on his journey, Augustine wrote something that has echoed across centuries. He wrote, "You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." Across generations and cultures, that restlessness has pointed toward the same truth. Our hearts long for a belonging that is spiritually deep, durable, and trustworthy. Belonging in faith is our best answer to spiritual restlessness. Augustine named the longing that we experience. The nuns live that longing. And Jesus received an answer about that from God. So let's think about the passage for a minute. He came to the Jordan River and asked John to baptize him. John hesitated, feeling the significance of the moment, but Jesus said, "Hey, do it anyway." He stood there with the crowd who'd gathered. He was a person in the crowd, just another person in the crowd. When he came up from the water, the heavens opened, the Spirit descended upon him, and a voice spoke, "This is my Son, the Beloved." Now, when I read this, what I want to know is, if there were no disciples yet, and no one else heard this voice, how did this story become part of the gospel? Right? Well, I know the answer. It's because Jesus told the story. We have it because Jesus wanted it known what happened to him. He told it because it is important for us to know. It was the beginning of his public ministry. It showed who he was, his connection with God, and that God affirmed what was about to begin. Whether or not the words were heard by anyone else didn't matter. What mattered was that Jesus heard them. This belonging placed Jesus and us within a larger story. We're today's chapter in the story of God's salvation. God's connection with humanity through the ages. You know this biblical story about characters and people of faith, for thousands of years. Well, now it's about us. Now this story is about you. During the Great Depression, a young man named Clarence Jordan grew up in rural Georgia in a farming family that struggled to survive. He was intelligent, he was determined, he earned scholarships, he mastered Greek and Hebrew, and he completed a doctorate in New Testament studies. By conventional measures, his future was secure. He could have chosen academics or a career in the church. Instead, he returned to the land he came from and bought a small, worn-out farm. He called the farm koinonia. It's the New Testament word for shared life, shared supportive life. Well, Clarence and his wife farmed alongside people who had been pushed to the margins, including black farmers in a deeply segregated South. They all worked together, they ate together, they made decisions together. It wasn't a program, it wasn't a charity effort, it was an intentional community shaped by faith and the conviction that people belong to God and to each other. But there was a cost. They dealt with harassment, they dealt with threats, they dealt with economic pressure, shots were fired, crosses were burned. His friends urged Clarence to leave, and he stayed. When he was asked why, he said that he couldn't teach the gospel one way and live it in another. For him, the koinonia community was not a concept to explain, it was his public expression of his belonging to faith. Well, years later, long after his death, that community is still there. Been there since 1942. It was the grounding for Habitat for Humanity. You've heard about that. Came from there. Families continue to work and share their lives together. Recognizing your belonging to God grounds your personhood. You're a child of God. Your worth is not measured by a great career or profitable investments or a surplus bank account or the lack of those things. Here's another expression of it. Henri Nouwen was a priest and a spiritual writer. He was known for gentle, honest reflections on prayer and compassion and belonging. Later in his life, on the high side, he left a successful academic teaching career. He taught at the University of Notre Dame, he taught at Yale, he was teaching at Harvard, and then he left and moved into a community that supported people with intellectual disabilities. Well, Nouwen expected to go into this community and offer wisdom and compassion. And instead, he found that he had to look at life in a new way. He shared in the ordinary routines of care and mutual support with folks who had challenges, and a transformation took place. He stopped seeing himself as a helper who was more capable than everyone else, and began to understand that he was just another member of the community. He came to see that worth, whether it was his or anyone else's, doesn't come from usefulness or independence. It just is. We are worthy because we belong to God. You know, there are always questions about boundaries. Who is welcomed in, and how communities respond when that connection is tested. So I got another story. It's not exactly a church story, but it's a human story of faith. 1947, Jackie Robinson stood at first base during a game in Cincinnati as racial abuse filled the stadium. The moment was public, it was isolating, and it was ugly. While that's going on, the shortstop, Pee Wee Reese, a beloved superstar, walked over, placed an arm around Robinson's shoulders, and stood beside him. They weren't really friends. No words were spoken between them, but the meaning was unmistakable. And Robinson later said that that moment helped him endure. The belonging of faith connects people across time. Tradition, ritual, our shared memory helps us recognize that we're part of something that began before us and will continue after us. In the biblical story, belonging is affirmed at the front end of faith, before any outcomes are known, before faithfulness is tested, before you've lived your life to see how it all comes out. Identity is spoken before action unfolds. At the Jordan River, before Jesus healed, taught, or preached, the voice spoke, "You are mine, you are beloved." So, May Keller, before you choose or promise anything this morning, this is what has been spoken over you today. You belong to God.